I'm going to call the meeting to order, but I don't think we need a roll call for this, right? Just to adjourn?
No, just to open the meeting, that's fine.
Okay, all right. All right, so before, I guess the reason we're having this meeting is to try to accomplish two goals. First one is to decide on the audit scope, the additional audit scope that the committee wants to do for fiscal year 2022. And then the second thing is to try to maybe clear up some of the misstatements that was said before. So before we start, before I hand it to Bob, I just wanted to say a few things. Bob, I'm going to ask you these questions. I know you know the answer. I know the answer, but it's for the benefit of everybody else watching in. So, first question I have for you is that you know the accounts payable expense process that you review. Do you review every year or once every 3 years?
We always review it every year. We do a walkthrough to see what the procedures are, to see if they've changed from the prior year. As far as expense testing goes, we don't just do a control test. We do several other procedures. Every 3 years, we do a statistically valid sampling for reliance, which we're, according to standards, we're allowed to do. And we can carry it forward as long as there has not been a significant change in procedures or personnel. So this year is the year we would do a 40 test regardless, because it's been 3 years.
Okay.
One thing that might have been misunderstood is we do all kinds of sampling every year. For instance, the first 3 months after year end, we pay close attention to for a couple of reasons. cutoff testing to make sure bills are in the correct fiscal year for the budgets. For instance, we've experienced in the past, sometimes we've had school departments overspend and try and put the expenditures in the next fiscal year. And that's the reason we test. You have an annual budget, so we have to make sure the annual expenses are going in the correct fiscal year. So we look at July, August, September while we're in there after year end because of that reason. Also, it's a search for unrecorded liabilities. So if you make a significant payment in September, we want to make sure that that was a liability, a payment against the correct fiscal year. Was there a liability that wasn't on the books of June 30th that relates to a subsequent payment? We also vouch expenses for materiality. Larger expenses, we vouch all of those expenses over a certain materiality level. It's also related to fixed assets. We'll vouch anything to do with fixed assets. Also, the town has a federal grant audit. So every year there's testing of payroll and vendor transactions on the major programs that make up a single audit that year. Those programs can change year to year depending on the program makeup that year.
Okay, Bob. As far as it relates to government testing and the government audit standards, we do not have a problem. I know the town is in compliance. It's in your report every year. So the government audit standards is not an issue here. I know you do extensive compliance testing, and like you said, the steps may change a little here and there every year, but that's not the issue we have. We're here more to talk about internal controls. So I'll ask you later on if any areas that you might do an additional testing for internal controls. But anything that relates to government audit standards, then no problems there.
Well, we annually do enough review on the controls.
Yeah.
I think what we're usually asked to do when we're asked to do extra work would be to concentrate on a lesser department that, based on materiality, may not get a in-depth look. So we might, what we would do is we'd ask management, finance department, are there any departments where that you would like reviewed because maybe there's been change in personnel, or you want to make sure the controls are working for that department. So generally, that's where we're asked to do some additional work, because we do enough work system-wide, for our opinion, for audit evidence when it comes to your major receivable systems and cash disbursements.
Okay. Now, I believe this year you will be doing the extensive testing on the activities account for the school, correct? It's like, I think every few years you have to do it because of government requirements.
The standard 40 test that was every 3 years is town-wide.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what you're getting at. On the single audit, the compliance auditing we do is mainly school because they make up a majority of the federal programs. So
the reason I'm asking you is that I was talking to Bill Yugner, who is the I guess business manager for the school department. He did say this year it's the year for them to do an extensive testing on activities account. So I just want to just confirm that this is the year you're doing it, 2022.
I'm not. Are you referring to student activity accounts?
Yes. Yes.
Those are separate, agreed upon procedure engagements.
Right.
They're generally separate from the regular audit.
So is this the year? Is this the year that's going to be done?
It may be. We'd have to talk to Bill and see where they're at on that.
Okay.
You don't do every school either. So
correct. It's not every year, but he did say
right.
This might be the year that it's going to be done. So
if they are required to be done, we will be doing them. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Next question I have is, have you been to the stadium or your staff been to the stadium to test any of the revenue, or if not, what's your process to recognize the income from the stadium?
Well, we review the documentation that they send us when they make payments, certainly. We also analytically compare year to year. We have revenue information going back several years. We do not go to the stadium. We audit Foxborough's records as part of the Foxborough audit. That would be a compliance audit with the contract. But for instance, I know the documentation we receive for instance, the football games, they tell us how many tickets are sold and by extension, the amount per ticket the town receives. And since they're generally sellouts and you know the capacity, you know, it approximates what you would expect.
Okay. Okay, next question I have before I'll let you recommend to us what else that you think we should do. The next question is on meals tax. I know this is a reimbursement we get directly from the state. So if the state sends you a check for, I'm making up $1 million for the whole year, for the fiscal year, that's $1 million. You may or may not know this, but about 10 years ago, I guess the selectmen and made at a town meeting had an informal agreement. I'll call it informal because it's not really written down. Informal agreement the town was trying to get the meals tax, the additional 75 basis points approved. And I guess it failed a couple of times, and finally when it was approved was when the town said, okay, any money we get from meals tax, we're going to help pay down OPEB, and then maybe some for the roads. So my question is, it's not the money coming from the state. I know, it is what it is, but I'm just curious. Do you maybe you haven't done it, but if we get $1 million, just make sure that you're taking it doesn't have to be dollar for dollar, maybe 975,000 or whatever the amount is that we're appropriating from the meals tax to pay down OPEB and roads. Is that something you would pass?
We're aware, but since it's not a bylaw or a statute, we don't review it as far as compliance. But I know in fiscal 22, there was an equivalency contribution to OPEB made just below the amount that was received for meals tax in 22.
Yeah. It's more, I understand it won't be dollar for dollar as long as it's within ballpark. Just to be fair, if the agreement is to, if we collect $2 million, let's make sure we at least fund at least 1.8, 1.9. We just the money was not meant to use for something else.
Well, in fiscal 22, it met that informal agreement intent. Yes.
But have you started fiscal 22, or are you referring to fiscal 21?
22, I'm referring to.
So, George, have we?
We're in 23 now. We're in 23 now, Larry.
Okay, so the money collected from fiscal year 21 was paid in fiscal year 22, correct?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Every year, with the exception of the two that we held back and we made up for it with these other two, we've been putting in the OPEB to the tune of some $965,000. For the most part, in most cases over the last couple of years, there's a little chart that we look at, and what we put into OPEB is actually more than what we've taken in the meals tax.
Right. Okay.
So maybe the confusion is, Larry, is that it's at 21. The payment for 21 was made in 22. So,
okay.
And the 22 payments will be made effectively in fiscal 23. That'll be done at the special town meeting in January. Okay.
So then you'll be even.
Then we'll be back up to snuff, and we'll be doing it on it. So we'll effectively make two payments in fiscal 23. One's the 22 payment, and the other one's going to be for the fiscal 23 payment,
which will be paid in probably
in 23. In 23.
November 23. Assuming we have special town meeting in November.
Right. Yeah, we're about to make a payment for 23. I think next week, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, but that special is January.
Right. But that's for 20. That's for 22, George. That's for 22.
Right. No, but I mean that will be the one that will get you even.
Yeah. Get us back to spec.
I mean, assuming it passes at the town meeting.
So, correct. So, George, so the money you collect for at the end of fiscal, I'm making it up, at the end of fiscal year 22, under normal conditions, will be paid in November of calendar year 22, because you collect the money and then you pay 5 or 6 months later, correct?
Well, once the town meeting,
Yes.
approves it, then what we do is we go forward and then they'll buy or they'll put it into the stock market in 4 equal payments throughout the next year, so as to sort of, if you will, kind of achieve a dollar cost averaging. Not quite the way we would do it if sometimes most people are doing it by the week or the month, but they're doing it more by the quarter. So you're not buying it all on one day, if that's answering it.
Okay. So by the end of fiscal year 23, we are caught up.
Yes.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
And ultimately you're caught up from a standpoint of what the town appropriated, let's say, by January, and then it's just a matter of how fast the treasurer is putting it in.
Okay. Bob, I'm done with my questions. So I guess from here, we want to hear from you to see if there's any areas that, might warrant an additional review, and the audit committee members might have certain areas they want, to talk about. But I'll let you speak first, Bob, and then I'm sure the members will jump in.
I don't have an area of concern where I would devote special resources to particularly. I'd refer to finance to ask them if there's a transition in a department or significant cash and collections in a department versus online payments. Maybe they would want us to review because of more cash activity than online activity. I'd rely on them for a suggestion because they work with those departments day to day, and I'd like to look at something that would help them the best, and I think they'd be the just judge of it. Nothing comes to mind that, for me, that presents a significant risk that I would want to look into beyond our normal audit.
Now, okay, and now I know you're asking about finance, about management. What about your firm looking at the controls in the finance department?
Well, we review the receivable and expense systems already. I review every budget entry that's made to the budget for the operating budgets for town, water, sewer. We essentially we create the budget to double check that everything's been posted correctly, which means we review most of the journal entries that come out of finance. Remember, finance doesn't generate a lot on its own. It receives data from the other departments and processes it through the system. So they aren't the originator of a lot of entries other than having to do with budget or journal entry corrections, which we already do a lot of work on.
Okay. Dennis, I think you have questions.
No, I was just going to say that I raised the issue of cash because it's a common area to look at, to do a drill down, because, there can be issues there. And I was satisfied with the answer at the last meeting that there was not a lot of cash in the system at all. So it wouldn't be a good use of audit resources. So I just wanted to weigh in there. That's what I heard because I had raised that issue. Common area to look at.
Bob, I think when he's saying cash, he's talking petty cash, like a tin that if I'm right, Dennis.
No, I'm talking any cash. Anytime staff is handling cash in any way.
Okay.
Petty cash in and of itself is not going to rise to be a major concern because
definition limited. Yeah.
I'm talking about general cash. Is there any general handling of cash within the system that, you know, is significant enough to really do a little bit of a drill down to make sure the controls, which have to be much stronger, are in place in those areas?
So if I could I'll just step into it now just to provide some understanding of that. So I think what you're referring to, Dennis, is somebody comes to the window and pays cash for their taxes.
Right.
You want to know, you know, how is that reconciled? How is that in to my understanding, every cash is reconciled every day. So there's no challenges between what's collected as to what's deposited.
Yeah.
Is that accurate, George? Is that?
Yes. And I think now that I understand, because, you know, the other night when you asked, I assumed you were talking about petty cash. I'm saying that there's very little of that out there one way or the other. But essentially, I think this came up in a conversation I had with somebody, is that I think if you went back a number of years, the handling of cash would have been much larger than it is now, because we do take now much more of credit card payments that are coming in over computerized and third-party lockbox services, what have you. That doesn't mean there's no cash, but I think it's probably now maybe, you know, 30% or 25% of what you take in. I've never really looked at, but it's significantly less than probably where it would have been 10 to 15 years ago.
But in terms of your procedures, you reconcile every day.
Yeah, yes. So and by the way, the practice is just, this might be relevant or irrelevant. All of the people that handle the cash, like your treasurer, the assistant treasurer, and one other person, who they're all bonded, okay, so that they can take the money to the bank. The money very rarely will stay in the, we have a safe, which if there is anything that came in after a bank run during the day, it's locked in a safe for the evening. There is a deposit made pretty much on a daily basis to remove it from the premise. It's we have a full complement now in the treasurer collector's office, meaning we have two people that are working the collection side and two people working the treasury side. So the money is reconciled, balanced, and deposited, and what have you, on a daily basis.
So from an audit point of view, not to prolong this discussion, I would assume you have all those policies and procedures and protocols in place to make sure that cash is being handled properly and reconciled properly. To me, that's the heart of the audit, to test that those procedures are being followed. That's my only point. Are we following the procedures that are in place to really protect, you know, any inadvertent loss of cash by an individual or by some other means? That's all. I just raise it as a very typical area to check. I don't know what the scope is of all the cash, but that certainly was my question.
So Bob, to piggyback on what Dennis just said, this is what, you know, we're looking at, you know, for you to maybe test the internal controls to say, yes, those controls are being followed. You know, yeah, you know, sometimes there's a cutoff, another $100 could show up after the cutoff. That's okay. But then, like George said, there's a process in place to secure the money. So, you know, the reason we don't want is someday somebody would just put whatever $200 in the drawer and lock it, and then the next morning someone breaks into it, and then we'll be pointing fingers at everyone. So that's why I'm asking you, Bob. And I know management has controls in place, but to Dennis' point, we want to make sure that those controls are tested to make sure that, okay, they have the controls and they're following it.
That's fair.
Yes, we review the daily cash procedures and do a walkthrough, and we do a complete, essentially, cash proof for the month that ties out all ledger entries to all cash deposits, 4-column type proof, which proves all transactions that go through the bank and the ledgers to make sure everything matches, not just a basic reconciliation.
Okay.
We can do additional testing of daily deposits if you requested that, certainly. But we do walk through and verify. You know, when they deposit daily, they close revenue daily. So,
I mean, I understand sometimes someone could come in and make a cash payment after the money was already, you know, you guys gone to the bank. So we just want to make sure that we then have a process in place to secure the money. That's all.
Sure. No, they you know, if it's after the deposit for the day, they keep track of what came in after the deposit and secure it for the night and take into account with the next day's deposit.
Especially on a Tuesday night when town hall is open till whatever 8 o'clock
right.
or 8:30.
Sure.
So
yes.
that's
exactly
when,
right.
That's when the cash is gonna, you know, can come into play.
Yes.
Do you have anything you can add for best practices for the municipal audit?
Well, what we've been mentioning, certainly verbally to every client, is the areas of risk in the current environment. You know, finance should do an annual risk assessment related to cybersecurity. And especially with towns, cybersecurity is an issue because you have additional records that are very sensitive in the school department and in the police department with personal records as well. So cybersecurity, disaster recovery are often topics we verbally mention. We don't write up a finding because we don't think you're deficient in that, but it's something that has to be continually monitored for the changing environment. I'm sorry about the dog right now. I think Amazon is at the door.
You know, Bill, I'll jump in on this, and I'm kind of looking at Bill on the TV here, but only recently for Standard & Poor's, they call us up and they go through things like that. And one of the big areas that they wanted us to talk about was our cybersecurity, at which time we had Aaron, the chief, Aaron Heyer, the chief IT man there. I believe he talked something like a half hour to 40 minutes to them with us in the room, talking about the various firewalls that they have put up, you know, various things that they do to keep up with the cybersecurity, which is their realm. And not to mention, I think I mentioned a couple of days ago that, Bill, you've said we have something like a $10 million coverage for that type of thing in an insurance policy.
Well, we have coverage. We had 10 million, but the market has dried up on that, so it's not available anymore. So I think it's close to about $1 million right now, and hopefully we'll continue to retain that. But but as part of that, the coverage is requiring that we have additional safeguards put in place technology-wise that we're actually working on as we speak. So we have taken Foxborough has been recognized as being one of the better communities in this Commonwealth for its IT practices and its handling of IT information and safely producing that and protecting the town's assets from that perspective. But we're also, because we're part of the Maya program, they have and provide us with additional safeguards that we're putting in place as we speak.
Hey, Bob, I want to circle back to the pilot and also local receipts. Local receipts, it's a big component for revenue after Chapter 70, 90, and real estate taxes. So I know, management comes up with an estimate of what local receipts will be for the year. Do you test to make sure that whatever we think we're going to get, we're getting? So it's testing to make sure that the revenue collected is reasonable. Sometimes it's off. I know you could have another COVID and everything could, whatever you're expecting falls off. But because local receipts is a big component, I'm curious if you would do some reasonable testing instead of just taking the numbers, booked by the town.
Sure. We audit the receivable systems and confirm the commitments, and like for real estate, we'll review the percentage collected. But we also have analytically every single revenue line in the town's revenue ledger. We have comparison to the budget, to the prior year, and every year prior to that, they're going back over 10 years. So, and we also confirm all the revenue with the state. So there's millions of dollars that we get the best confirmation available by directly from a state website. So we always compare analytically the percentage of property taxes collected versus the commitment. The same with other receivables, and as well as the analytical comparison. And we review that analytical comparison. We sit down with George and/or Maria and go through every single line. In case there's anomalies, we want to know why something went up or down more in a particular year. That's been challenging a little bit with COVID because it has produced quite a few anomalies.
Right.
But we have extensive information on revenue and comparisons to multiple years as well as the current year's budget. We calculate the percentage plus or minus, the dollar value plus or minus, compared to budget, compared to prior year. And we have extensive analytical work that we sit down with the client on that as well.
One other thing I'll throw in on that, and not to take away from Bob, I look at Bob's work or the auditor's work as the main. But when it comes down to those revenues and the things coming in, we have to do a complete, for lack of a better word, regurgitation of everything that we've done for the year on what is known as the recap sheet. And that goes into the state, and that's then again analyzed by another set of eyes as far as like what are we predicting. Let's take the local receipts for a second. If last year the local receipts, I'm just making up a number, $10 million, okay, and I came in with a figure of 25 million next year, it wouldn't be accepted unless I'd have to write narratives on everything to say, why is this up this high? Now, there could be an explanation for it, but if there isn't, the Bureau itself, who's monitoring us, would say, we're not allowing that. And you'd have to go back and start all over again.
Okay. Does anyone have any further areas you might want to talk about? Bernard, Brian, Paul shaking his head. So Go ahead, Bernard.
Yes, Bob, thank you for the thorough review. Two questions on my side. Number one, given the rather lean staff in the finance accounting area, would you say that in terms of separation of duty, this is an area you've looked at or could comment upon that? In other words, do we have enough segregation of duties to ensure that we don't have any, not to use the word collision, but enough separation of duties given the lean staff?
Yes, you do. And you accomplish that even better when you have a finance department with a finance director. Obviously, Maria is on the accounting side, and Maria and George would not be initiating any of the cash transactions, whether it be revenue or disbursements, unless directly related to their own department. So there is separation from that point of view. And, the Treasury side reconciles cash, and then George reconciles the ledger with the Treasury's records. So there's good separation of the oversight on the results versus the actual receipt and disbursement initiation.
Thank you, Bob. The second question on my side is, you mentioned that really the emphasis on the audit is really more on the financial controls. Maybe this is because of the private company work. In terms of internal controls, benchmark-wise, do other towns sometimes do audits having to do with internal controls, or the focus is really mainly financial control?
I've never been asked to do a specific assignment beyond our work on internal control systems. It's always been review of departments, especially, we encounter, and I've encountered in my career, many situations where the job isn't being done very well, and we've had to go in those situations and do reviews. I mean, a town not too far from you, we used to audit, and they were 18 months behind in reconciling cash. That's a problem. And we write up material weakness comments in those situations. But as far as basic review, the Massachusetts system on the warrant system for disbursements is fairly well defined and doesn't vary too much from town to town, whether it's small or large. So there's generally not a request in that area. It's usually when a town has some trouble, and we have to go in and not only review, but maybe do more work.
See, Bob, the reason why we're asking for, your recommendations for additional review is, I'm sure you heard about Quincy, having their losing 90 million, but some ridiculous amount on their retirement account because, people were still able to initiate requests after the person left the job. So sometimes it, as it relates to government auditing standards and compliance with all the steps, we're good. I know we're good. There's no issues. But sometimes, it's there anything that we miss. That's why we're asking you, are we doing enough? Are we good? It's all we're trying to get. I know you cannot guarantee stuff, and I'm not asking you to guarantee, but if there's anything, if there's any area that might be a deficiency, it'd be nice to that at least we talk about it and we can decide if we want to accept the risk.
Well, I believe you are. I mean, certainly you want to. It's not this. I'm not sure how it gets into internal control to the point, but some of the situations that happened out there have to do with the personnel. I know one town lost quite a bit of money. Essentially, it was a phishing type thing, and money got wired somehow the wrong way, and it may more have been a performance issue than a control issue. You can have controls, but you got to follow them, and you have to have competent people to be wary of, especially in finance transactions, of the current environment.
Brian, do you have anything?
You're muted, Brian.
You're mute.
I do not.
Okay. Paul, you good?
I think Dennis had a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to give other people a chance, but I have another. Common areas where you kind of target the other areas you mentioned, personnel, is payroll, and I don't know how many employees Foxborough has. If you look in the public, 700, yeah. So it's not. I've worked in organizations 3,000 to 7,000 people, but 700 is still a large number of employees. Have we ever done a payroll audit? Is that part of the audit function? When I say payroll audit, is And again, with electronics nowadays, it's not as much of an issue, but just to make sure that every check that's generated is actually going to a real person. Have you ever done that test, Bob? Is that part of it?
No, we have not done that test. We document in our payroll review, and this is based on my 40 plus years of experience. Even though you're a large town, you operate based on budgets that are very thoroughly reviewed. The chance that there'd be a phantom employee in a local government, I'm not talking about Boston, but is, in my view, I've never seen it, and I think it'd be almost negligible potential of that happening. I sometimes joked to some townspeople out there that I'm part of the government that know more about who's getting paid what in the town. There's always a few interested parties that are always looking around. But you go through such an intense budget process, the possibility of a phantom employee being created to warrant audit resources, I think is really remote. We could do something. I mean, in the private sector, yeah, I've done payroll payoffs and things like that, and reviews. But I've never, certainly at the town level, I've never heard of a circumstance myself, and certainly never seen one in the maybe 700 or 800 audits I've been part of.
Be hard to do because we line item every payroll individually on the budget exhibits.
Yeah, I mean, it even goes to consultants. I mean, I've seen it, and I've seen problems, and I've seen it in public organizations. Actually, I've seen it more in public organizations and private organizations because of the lack of controls. But 700 is not, a number that would probably yield much. And I wouldn't say you do this every year, quite frankly. I mean, you do it maybe periodically every 3 years or 5 years. It's just making sure that people are getting checks or live people, whether they're payroll checks or they're consulting checks or whatever. People are pretty innovative, I hate to say it, but they are.
Especially nowadays.
Yeah. So I just bring it up. Is it, another area I've seen?
One other thing I'll just throw in on it, Dennis, is just like what we were saying about the cash end of it, how things have evolved over the last 7 to 10 years with more electronically done. The advent, and I'm drawing a blank on what with the when Obamacare and what have you came in a few years back, it created another level of reporting that the town has to do, at least in the payroll area, and the stuff that a person, when they come on the job, has to bring now. Everything from a birth certificate, and there's a number of things that come with it. Which again, is that flawless? No, there's nothing flawless, but I think it just adds another layer of you had to, before somebody starts getting paid, they had to actually come in and deliver all these various things, and here we even have to get a physical, which I never had to do in another town. And, at my weight, I was a little nervous about that. So,
just to follow up on Dennis, and I know what you're saying, Dennis. We don't want to be paying for someone that's no longer here, or a phantom employee. But on the other hand, George, Bob, the way I see for payroll setup is, let's say Bill hired an assistant at let's say we're approved for $40,000, but then whoever sets up the ADP payroll, if you use ADP, may have set up for $42,000, and then no one catches it. So this person is getting paid more than what was agreed upon. You're right. At some point at year end, we will see the fluctuation in budget. Don't get me wrong, and then no one will catch it. But with people coming and going, sometimes those $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 could be hidden in the differences. So on Dennis' question is that maybe once in a long, once every few years, maybe test a new employee that the town hired at, say, $28 an hour. I'm making it up. So to make sure that it's signed for $28 and it's set up in the system for 28, not $29.50 or $30 or someone fat finger the numbers. But I know what you're saying. It's a small town, yeah, the chance for fraud is not going to be a lot, but mistakes could happen. So that's why Dennis is asking the question, which is fair.
No, sure. Mistakes and data entry mistakes can be made. We do refer to payroll contracts when we do. We have to do several payroll steps on the federal grants. So, in those cases, we do verify that, in those cases, the teacher rates and that they're getting paid, through the grant and things like that. So there is some comparisons on some payroll transactions happening.
Okay.
I can tell you, I don't think anybody here would object to you doing that kind of an analysis. Bob, if you needed to do something like that, because we do go through multiple checks in terms of how people get paid. There are multiple sign-offs before a person actually gets entered into the system. There's probably at least 3 or 4 sign-offs before it gets there. So it is checked on multiple levels, including my own. So it's a pretty, but anybody could make it an error. There's no question about that. So it's a fair question. It's a fair analysis. Nobody here would object to it. I would think the likelihood of it happening is pretty small, but it's a fair question.
And also along that lines, again, we maybe once in a while look at the stipends that we pay people are correct. Depending on certain jobs on weekends, if they're on call, I'm just making it up. If someone's on call and Bill agrees to say, if you're on call on weekend, we'll pay you $50 for that weekend. So just make sure the stipend is correct. So once in a while, it's okay to look at stipends, look at payroll setup. And then if someone is terminated, or I use the word terminated because that's what we do at work, but someone could be retired, someone could retire, someone could quit. So make sure that when Bill's retire, okay, his last pay, whatever, unless it's a separate agreement, to make sure that his weekly or monthly payroll is stopped. So it's a good control to look at it once in a while. Not every year, maybe every 5 years, but it's something that it's good to test.
The payroll test could be done, and select a sample and compare it to the current week that's being paid, but then refer to the contracts and pay rates as well.
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah. So besides payroll, anything else we want to consider having Bob look at? I see nothing. So,
Nope.
So, Bob, I have another question. I know the past few years with COVID, it was tough getting the audit done. I know that. Do you anticipate any problem with fiscal year 22 audit? And when do you think it will be done, I guess?
We're on site now. We hope to meet the normal single audit due date of March 31st. I think that's still been extended as well.
Okay.
We have been dealing with the COVID hangover for 2 years, delays. When you have 20 clients and you can't go to them for 6 months, it creates a ripple effect. But we are in there now, and so the majority of the work will be completed by early January.
So
I've already done the ledger work that I do, and my staff are out there now.
So you think it's possible for Foxborough could be done by the end of March?
Yeah, we'll certainly have a full set of draft financial statements. Whether we have every confirm in, that depends on some other factors. But
I understand.
We'll certainly have a report that's worth review. The committee's review.
Bob, did you explain? Maybe I missed it. Did you explain why it was delayed this year? There was a new federal requirement that came out that slowed everything down at the very end.
Well, they on the COVID grants, they kept changing all the rules and the goalposts. So, they didn't even come out with final rules for us to use until way late in the time period. So it's just been a ripple effect with everybody. George and I were talking, there was a period of time when, even if we try to work remotely, if there's nobody going into the town hall to procure documents to send to us remotely, you can imagine the delays that created across everybody's client base, really. But we're there now, and trying to get back on a normal reporting cycle after COVID.
Hey Bob, this might be a complicated question. I was just thinking of pension. Do we review? I know pension is, that's all that pension. Everything's done separately. But are we? Do we have anyone in town that's administrating the pension payments to make sure that that bill is getting the right amount? And then if something happens to Bill, the wife, even depending on the pension selected by Bill, the spouse could get the rest of the benefit. I'm just asking. I know it's complicated, and I know some.
Well, that all happens through the county. Okay. What the town does is they pay their annual assessment, which is based on the county reporting, okay. And everything else goes through the county. We have received the current.
Everything is from the county, right, Bill?
That's correct. Right. That's correct.
Good. It's good. All right. I do know, Bob, that Bill Yugna said, there were certain steps that there's going to be a special arrangement to get it done this year. So I will remind him tomorrow to reach out to you or somehow, or tell George, or have you guys talk to make sure that the steps that he wants done on the school side will be done in fiscal year 22. I'll tell Bill Yugna.
Sure.
Because anyone have anything else for Bob? No.
Nope.
Okay. So Bob, I think we're good. Other than the payroll stuff. So I'm even.
We'll add a payroll test along the lines that you're discussing for validity of the work. And the rates and
yeah, good. All right, I think Bob, you're welcome to stay. We're just going to do a quick administrative stuff, but I think I thank you for coming in. I know it's late in the night, but thank you for coming in.
Yep. Good evening.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
Good to see you, Bob.
Good night.
Good night.
Okay, the next thing we have is the approval of the October 11 minutes. Do we have any discussion on the minutes?
I have a request if they don't come in like 2-point fonts.
You just have to hold the laptop up to your face, Brian.
Yeah. Oh, God.
I was trying to fit them on one page so that we didn't have like multiple pages. But I can actually, if you have a hard time, I can resend them to you with a larger font if you need it.
Just a future request, thank you.
Well, I'm doing the minutes, Brian, so there'll be 16 font. We're good.
All right, thank you.
If you didn't have glasses before, you'll need them now.
Okay, so do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I move that they be approved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Paul?
Yes.
Dennis?
Aye.
Yes.
Bernard, yes. Brian, yes. Larry, yes. Okay. Minutes is done. I think we're all set with Bob, and I don't think we need anything else from him. So, unless we have anything else you want to talk about, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Well, hang on. I have a quick administrative question. So I thought that was a good discussion, and I think it's good that he's looking at something different. Do we have the authority to expand or change his scope, or does that technically have to go through the BOS?
What
So
I'm going to do is, after this meeting, I'm going to send an email to the full board of directors,
Okay.
the full select board, and tell them this is the only, we discussed, everything's good. The only thing we're gonna suggest to Bob to expand on is payroll testing.
Can we make that a formal motion, just to have a motion to give the BOS
Okay.
that the
Can
audit
I have a-
committee recommends?
Can I have a motion that the that I will type a memo to the select board to engage Bob to perform payroll testing.
Additional payroll testing, yeah.
I second it.
Okay. All in favor? Paul?
Yes.
Dennis?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Bernard? And Larry, yes. Okay. All right. I will send an email to the select board. I'll CC you, Bill and George, so you guys will see it, and
Great.
that will make that the official request. And then at the next select board meeting, if Bill, you wanna, maybe bring it up, have them approve it,
Sure.
we'll get it done.
And then
Yeah, that sounds like the right process. So thank you.
based on your questions, Larry, we would likely be meeting. Well, maybe this is a question for Bob. He talked about having the preliminary work done in January. When would we, as the audit committee, typically be able to look at something? Would have been the question. Is it really March or is it January? When will he have a preliminary report? That would have been a good question.
I think he mentioned that he says, how did he just phrase it? He says, I think I'll have, like draft reports. And he goes, and some of the stuff might not be completely done, but it would be by the March period. But he goes, you'd have enough to be able to do something with.
Evaluate.
Evaluate, yeah.
So Larry, does that mean we meet next in March?
I'm hoping for March or April, but
Okay.
it all depends. It all depends on when we get that nice report.
This is way easier than AdCom, Larry.
I don't know.
Well, we'll see, I guess.
Maybe.
To be determined. Right.
Fair enough.
Okay. I think we're all set. So can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
To a second?
Second.
All right. Paul?
Yes.
Dennis?
Yes.
Bernard?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Larry? Yes. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, George. Thanks, Bill, for attending. And I think Marie's in the background, but thank you.
All right.
Happy holidays. Happy holidays, everybody.
Yeah, happy holidays as well. Bye-bye.
See you.